Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the Winning in Professional Services podcast. My name is Matteo, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Scott Pressimone. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about lead generation campaigns versus brand marketing campaigns. Essentially, we're going to talk about short-term versus long-term marketing approaches and which one works best in which scenario and whether there's maybe alternatives to using one or the other. The reason why we are talking about this episode or this particular topic today is because I have personally come across several companies in my career that whenever they were thinking about starting any sort of a new marketing initiative, they most of the time thought about getting very quick results. They imagined that they could essentially turn on a switch and marketing leads would start pouring in very quickly, essentially. And as a marketer myself, I know marketing is more of an ongoing effort, but there are maybe ways that we can try to get business a little bit more quickly. However, maybe that's really not marketing anymore. We're maybe talking more about sales. And I wanted to get Scott, your opinion first before we sort of jump into the meat of the episode. What's your take on this? What do you think about sort of long-term, short-term approaches when it comes to generating new business for professional service companies?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things we have to think about is how competitive is your space, right? So you mentioned that a lot of companies will try to do marketing and have a very quick impact, turn on the marketing switch and have leads come in. And I'll admit I have actually worked with companies where that can work. Let's say a simple example of running Google Ads. So you're doing a pay-per-click campaign. In some cases where it's a very high demand service and the offering is very clear, you can potentially start running some ads, which is a marketing effort, and get conversions very quickly. However, I think one of the areas that we're focusing on a little bit more here today, Matteo, are in professional services firms where it is a higher dollar value service, and it's something that's very highly competitive, and it takes a little bit more time to get results. So to your point, we have to be thinking, okay, if we're in a service industry that requires a longer sales process and is a higher value dollar service, then how can we make this balance between getting results to pay the bills in the coming months as opposed to having the effect that in the next year or so you can start having some efficiencies where you're benefiting yourself by some efforts that you did and you're starting to get the results of it 6 months or a year later. And we probably have to strike that balance because it's totally fair that if you're an owner and you're saying, I want some marketing so I can get leads, it's a totally fair, thing to want. Hey, marketing, that they're here to get demand for me. But I think we do have to realize that it's not always so simple and we have to strike a balance. And I think that's really what you and I are going to be talking about today. And it's just about being realistic, right? It's not about saying that marketing is never going to get results in the short term, in the midterm, and only in the long term. I think it's about just knowing what you're getting into, being realistic, and making sure that you're optimizing things on your team so that you can get some benefit in each level of those, short, middle, and long.
Yeah, I would actually want to double click on the idea of professional service companies selling high value services. And I think that's really the key here, because if we are, like you said, trying to think short term and essentially maybe do a bunch of paid advertising where we are trying to get people from our ads, whether they are on Google or maybe LinkedIn if our audience is B2B, and drive them over to our website and essentially trying to get those people to fill out a form, essentially. That's what's most common amongst professional service companies. The success rate from experience is, like you said, fairly low. People, if they're not familiar with your company, may not be open to share their contact information with a company they've never heard of. Obviously, if your offer is more enticing, if your offer pertains to a service that is in very high demand, that essentially provides value very quickly, where the actual outcome is clearly stated, maybe you would have a bit more success with this type of activity. But for all others, maybe more B2B type professional service companies, this type of motion from ads to landing page to a form is, could be a bit of a miss sometime. So yes, you could essentially try to do this only, and then maybe a few people, maybe a 1% or a 0.5% of the people that you're able to reach through your ads will end up converting, and you will end up having a call with them. And obviously then it's a matter of you qualifying those people and see if you're actually able to serve them and if they are the right type of fit for your services and for your company. But the other side of this, or sort of the other option that could potentially make your lead generation campaigns work better, is what I like to call brand marketing, or there's other people in the B2B space who call it demand creation, right? So with short-term tactics, you're essentially trying to capture existing demand, people that have a certain problem, searching for a solution. And so maybe some people might type into Google how to fix XYZ, and you are a provider fixing XYZ. You have an ad, people see your ad, you can fix XYZ, click on the ad, land on your landing page, and maybe someone will get in touch with you. But like we said, from experience, from data, it's hard to make this activity successful. However, if you try to educate your audience on how to prevent the XYZ problem, maybe, you're essentially putting yourself out more as a resource and an educator, as an authority in your particular industry and area of expertise. And if at any point in time somebody will eventually come across a piece of content where you're educating them on how to prevent certain types of issues or how to solve certain types of issues without necessarily getting in touch with you, if at any point in time later you decide to run, say, a lead generation campaign and somebody has already come across your content before, or maybe they haven't come across your content, but it's hard for people to click on an ad, land on a page, and fill out a form at that same moment in time. They might go back to their search results, look at other results. Maybe they come back to your site at a later stage and then find out that you actually have certain pieces of content on your site, maybe videos or maybe articles where you are walking them through how to solve certain issues without necessarily asking them for anything. That's where I think your lead generation campaigns could potentially yield better results, because you are essentially just, first providing value to them, providing information without any second sort of agenda. And then if you're actually, coming across as trustworthy enough, some people may decide that, actually, I want to try to understand if this company can help me solve this problem. So this is maybe going already a little bit into, the core of the episode here is lead generation campaigns are maybe a short-term band-aid that I, would only suggest people using if they're really scrambling or need quick business and don't know where to start. Maybe lead generation campaigns could be one way to start. But I would actually argue that if you pair a lead generation campaign with a demand generation or a brand marketing campaign, your lead gen potentially could yield better results. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Scott.
Sure. So I'm just going to summarize some of your points, Matteo. As you said, if we think of lead generation, then you are using tactics like driving traffic to a landing page, you have a form, you have a lead magnet, you're doing cold calling, you're doing cold emails. You're basically just sending your message out there and saying, I offer a service. Okay. And one thing I would think about with this is where you're, I believe, a bit more like a commodity. I'm going to again go back to a simple example of an ad campaign. So let's say that you are offering marriage counseling or something like this. Let's just pretend you're a marriage counseling company and someone types in marriage counseling and then you have an ad come up and you say, I'm a marriage counselor, right? That's an ad where they've never heard of you before. They just saw your ad. They probably have clicked your ad, clicked another ad, click a first search result. They might have a lot of tabs open and they're now comparing you to other people in the marriage counseling space. Now, to your point, this can have this can have a quick result because some of those people who click your ad are now going to potentially buy your service. However, I think it is important to think about that journey of that individual. They are searching online for a general term like marriage counseling. They are now comparing you to other marriage counselors, and you have to then ask, how are they making a decision at that stage? And I would say, just walking through the scenario, I think that they're probably looking at reviews, like Google reviews of those options, and they might be looking at costs. And so in that way, I think it's basically, let me get a list of all these companies I'm looking at, or a list of all these counselors I'm looking at, the reviews and the cost, and then make a decision. Now, some of them might not make a decision right away. So again, you have to do the calculation to say how many of them are actually making the decision. What's the ROI of my ads? I'm spending this much on ads. This is how many people are going to the page. This is how many people are selecting me. But in my mind, you are now a commodity. You're a commodity that's somewhat differentiating by your website, by the number of your reviews, by whatever else. But you're a commodity. Whereas when you then look at the demand gen, as you said, or if you look at the brand marketing, this is a bit different because this is a case where someone has seen what you're offering. You're more of a thought leader. You're pushing content out there. You are expressing how to help fix a marriage. You are the doctor that or the counselor that people know of. They've read your book before. They have seen your posts before. They love the advice that you're giving. And then when they say, you know what, we need a marriage counselor, that's where they're saying, well, I'm obviously going to go with Counselor Jill. Counselor Jill is just the best of the best. And gosh, I love the advice she gives in all these other areas. Therefore, I'm going to pick her. And then guess what? You're making a decision less based off price. So I do think that that's just something to be thinking about is how are people making decisions when you're doing this lead gen versus when you're doing demand gen. I believe when you're doing lead gen, you're more of a commodity and they're looking at a couple metrics and they're making a decision or they're not making a decision. Whereas demand gen, they're getting to know you and they're making a decision and pricing is probably secondary. So that's where I go back to what you were talking about before, Matteo, is that if we're talking about higher dollar services, let's say that you're offering a $3,000 per month service. Well, if that's a $3,000 per month service and then someone that's another search result gives a $2,000 service, I think it's more likely that you might lose those people because they're going to choose the 2,000 over the 3,000, and now you're competing on price. Do you think that's a fair way to look at it, Matteo?
I do think so. I think, in the market, there's people who, are more price sensitive. And if you actually come across those people while you run lead generation ads, you might close one of them. They may not be your ideal customer, depending on how you define your ideal customer, right? But you might come across them. Not everybody's, into getting educated. There's maybe people that are in desperate need for a marriage counselor, and they cannot really, wait around and read books and get educated all that much. But I think there are people that actually, before they reach out to any type of, service provider, they want to do a lot of self-education before, they want to actually know what is their problem. I know I do this type of things. Like if I need to hire, I guess even if I want to hire, somebody to come fix my AC in my apartment, I kind of want to try to understand like what is the general sort of idea, or what is the general maintenance work that an AC unit needs to get once a year? How much could that roughly cost? How much work is it needed? Are there any replacement parts that I need to consider replacing? So I do a bunch of research. I don't just want to hire or get the first person to come and fix my AC unit, and then get surprised all of a sudden of a bunch of things that I wasn't really aware of. Again, you could think, oh, but you're very price sensitive. Yes, I am. I could be, but I also want to know before I make a purchase. So I think there are people that, but obviously if my AC is leaking, maybe I don't have the time to do all that research. And so I type, AC repair, and the first result or the first, couple results are the ones that eventually I'm going to call up and decide which one to work with and let them come and fix my AC. So it really depends also on at which stage of the buyer's journey your potential customer is. If they are at the very bottom of the buyer's journey, if they are really in need for some type of solution, the lead generation campaign, it's really the one that is going potentially to get you the best results, because those people are ready to buy. But when somebody has identified a potential problem, but they're not in desperate need to solve it right away, then the brand marketing, demand generation campaign or activity is what is going to work best in your case. And that's why I think companies should actually implement both at the same time, because yes, you can only do demand generation or brand marketing and wait for people to get educated from all the content you put out and wait for people to reach out to you. But there's actually probably a better way or a more proactive way to actually get a bit more control out of the demand generation and brand marketing activity. One of which is, yes, running both campaigns in parallel. You're running a certain number of ads on platforms where your target audience may potentially search for solutions related to your services or to their problems related to your services. Or you could say run a demand generation campaign, a brand marketing campaign, where you are publishing content on platforms like YouTube or LinkedIn or on your website, where the content is going to get indexed on Google, and then essentially wait for people to show intent or interest in the information that you put out. And what I mean by that is, say you're publishing on YouTube or you're publishing on LinkedIn. Some people will interact with your content. Maybe they will like it, maybe they will comment, maybe they will ask questions, maybe they will share it. Those people seem to be the ones that have the highest interest in the information you're putting out. Not everyone will be an ideal customer for you or a potential customer for you. Some people may just be people you have in your network that are going to like and share your content, regardless of whether maybe they're not even your ideal customer profile. But among those people, there will be at some point, ideal customers, potential customers that you could, with the right approach, and start having conversations with. And that's what I think, Scott, you would call smart outbound, or how would you describe this type of activity exactly?
Yeah, I think when you and I were talking about this, I was thinking that it's smart outbound because you're putting a little bit more thought into it than just, hey, let me buy an email list and let me spam them my message, or let me run some ads and have a super generic ad that's going out and just kind of hope it works. I think that the reason I point out that distinction is because I do think that can be appealing because, again, let me just summarize the two different options. We have lead gen, which is let me get leads quickly, let me cold call, let me run ads, let me do anything to just get the message out there so I can get quick results. And then you get other people saying, oh, no, I just focus on demand gen where we're writing books, we're posting videos, we're doing LinkedIn thought leadership posts, we're getting on stage, right? So you have those two different things. And of course, I don't know if we highlighted this, but they both had advantages and disadvantages. And if we think about demand gen, that slower one, it's that it takes a long time to have an impact. And it's that it's hard to measure the ROI of it. And it's that it's, again, sometimes you just can't wait. Sometimes you can't wait a year to have an impact. You have a business, you need some new clients. You lost a client, you need to fill it in with new clients. So it's hard to say, hey, let's give speeches and start a YouTube channel or start a podcast and hopefully one day it'll work. You can't do that either. So I think that's why we're coming again to summarize, getting back to this idea of, well, you might need to do both. And if you're doing both, then what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean just saying, let me buy a list and let me spam people, right? It means let's create some content. Let's build a bit of a foundation where we're at least respected and known and educational and sharing good information, right? And then when we do some of this outbound, we're going to be less generic because we actually have content to lean on. We have thought leadership to lean on. We have content on our site. So if someone sees us and then looks us up and looks on our LinkedIn profile, looks on our company LinkedIn profile, they're going to see content there. And I'm describing that as being a little bit more smart outbound because I think it's harder and harder to do this turnkey outbound, right? This, let me hire a company to spam a bunch of people on LinkedIn or send direct messages to people on LinkedIn. Let me hire this company who I can just, I'll go to a lead generation kind of site and do a filtered search based off, I want a company of this size, I only want to talk to CEOs, and I want this and I want this, and let me just write a generic email and spam it out. I think that's incredibly hard today. And it's because it's so easy, right? So if hundreds of companies can buy a subscription to a service that's going to allow them to get a whole bunch of email addresses, and they can all make a super generic email and click the go button, then everyone's going to do that. And guess what? It's no longer going to get results because a million people are doing it, right? And so that's where I think you have to level up. I think that option's almost off the table. Not for every industry. Maybe if you're selling gym memberships or whatever else, you might still be able to kind of do some pretty basic outbound and maybe that works. But I think it's way more effective if you take a bit of a balanced approach as you've described here, Matteo, and you put a little more thought into your outbound. You don't just cross your fingers and say, I hope my material is going to work. Instead, you're creating good material and you're not just waiting for someone to knock on your door saying, I'm ready to buy your service. You're getting smart about approaching the people that have either shown interest in your service, that are reading articles related to your service, that are engaged in your LinkedIn post about your service. You are not waiting. You are going to their house, right? So they showed a bit of interest. They raised their hand a little bit, and you're delivering them new information. And you're saying, hey, maybe we should have a call. You're not going too aggressive, but you are getting to the point where you are approaching them. And that can be tough to do sometimes, but it can be necessary if you need clients in the shorter midterm. Is that a fair summary of what you've been saying there, Matteo?
Yeah, 100%. I do think that having content to back up your outbound is crucial. Having content helps with outbound, not just because people will eventually check out your LinkedIn company page or your website or see if you have any YouTube videos or anything like that, maybe a podcast. All those things I think are helpful to build more trust with the people you reach out to. You know, people are generally skeptical of strangers. So if you reach out to somebody with a cold call or a cold email, whether that's a cold messages on LinkedIn, people are not going to immediately respond. Even if they're online, they're not going to respond. They are going to first wonder, who is this person? For whom does this person work? What is the name of the company? They're going to look for the name of your company. They're going to search on LinkedIn. They're going to search on Google. If they're going to try to see if you're a legitimate business. And having content helps because it shows that you're not just some random company that popped up out of the blue and tried to get them to pay, money for some random service you offer. So I think that's crucial. Just having content is going to help, establish your company as a more credible entity. And then you're also going to be able to redirect certain questions from prospective clients to maybe content that you have created over time. That's how a lot of the sales enablement content I've been able to develop for some of my clients in the past, has been used. And maybe initially we didn't really think about, oh, this is going to be used for sales enablement, but eventually a lot of the content we created was used for that purpose. Clients ask questions during the sales process, during the discovery process, and yes, you could answer all of those questions via email, or if you're on a call, you could definitely answer those questions over those calls. But you could also go in more depth and share maybe an article that you have written or a video that you've recorded on those particular topics people are going to ask you about. And that's just going to build more and more of that credibility with those prospects. And eventually, you're going to have an easier time, most likely, to convert those people into paying customers. It's not going to be an immediate conversion. It's not going to take 2 days. Maybe it's going to take 2 months. Again, we know that professional service companies' sales cycles are long, but the goal really here is to build a sustainable business. It's not to have some, quick win and then kind of disappear or just stop doing this type of activities altogether because now we've won a customer. We want to do this on a regular basis. Marketing, I think it's very much an ongoing, never-ending activity that businesses should undertake for as long as they are in business. Any thoughts on this, Scott?
No, I just agree with you there, Matteo. I think that we can't focus solely on the inbound. We can't focus solely on the demand gen. But I think if you make that part of what you do, and maybe you could share some examples of what you do personally, Matteo, because I think you do a great job with this as well in the content production and side of things. But I just want to give a simple example is that if you set up a company culture where you're always having a webinar every month, or you're recording a video every day, or you're doing whatever, that's just the default. That needs to become the default. And so if that is just something that you do, that's the way we operate as a company. We always have monthly webinars. We create an ebook or a offer of some sort or an infographic every quarter. That's just what we do. Now, if you have that, and that's the baseline, then when you're doing the outbound, you now have more materials to pull from. So as you said before, Matteo, maybe you didn't create that material for sales enablement. Maybe your webinar is helpful to your existing clients. So maybe you created a webinar which is all about educating your existing clients or educating people on a topic, and that was the goal of it. But guess what? When you're doing your smart outbound and someone already, again, downloaded something or engaged with a post or did whatever, and you've now identified someone as interested in your service, you don't need to wait for them to find your material. That's a time where you can then say, hey, Jim, I saw you responded or you commented on my LinkedIn post about this. By the way, I'm not sure if you knew, but we have this webinar this was a few months ago, but it's still hyper relevant. I thought you might like it. Boom. Now you're doing some more assertive, right? Some outbound. You're not waiting for that individual to find your content, but you're leveraging that content another way. Now, if you haven't done any of that, if that hasn't been part of your culture, you're not creating that material, then what are you going to do? Now you're basically saying, hey, I'm not sure if you saw our services or not. Hey, can you buy my service now? Right? I mean, if you don't have that material, then you don't have much to work with. And now you're just a stranger that's annoying them, right? Because they don't trust you, they don't know you, and you're out there basically pitching yourself versus leading with value, leading with the material that you've already been creating, which is already part of your process. So I think you need to be doing both. But again, I'll go back to you, Matteo, is that I think you do a great job with this. You're hyper active on things like LinkedIn, but you're also doing some outbound. So maybe telling your story a little bit and some of the things that you do might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm very new to doing outbound, so I'm still very much in, learning, in a learning phase, and I'm, adjusting my approach almost weekly, because I'm definitely not the type of person who loves doing outbound, but having started my company very recently, I have almost no reputation in the market, which means I need people to see who I am and see that I exist. And, I think this is for me one of the first stepping stones into taking my business to the next level, which eventually potentially could mean doing less outbound and then focusing more on building my reputation as a service provider. But generally, the way I approach outbound is fairly simple. I publish content on a regular basis on LinkedIn. For me, it's pretty much every day of the week, except for weekends. And there are people who engage with my content, and there are people that I also do. Actually, I add at least 20 people to my network every day. On LinkedIn, I think there is a maximum limit of, I think, about 100 connection requests that you can send out every week. And I have a target ICP that I have defined for my business. And generally, I try to identify about 20 people every weekday, and I send a connection request to those people. And anywhere between 20 to 40, sometimes 50% of those connection requests get accepted. And when people accept my connection requests, I generally send them a message at some point, maybe not right away, but within the week, I send an icebreaker. I send them a message, just welcome them to my network, or thanking them for accepting me in their network, and then try to establish some type of rapport, build some, start to establish some kind of relationship, ask them questions, whether those are, business related or more personal questions, just to sort of establish some, some conversation there. And then over time, I could, try to probe them and try to see if they may have a need for the type of services I offer. But I'm not going to, start, bombarding them with questions right away. I'm obviously going to be very cautious of, trying to read between the lines also of their messages, if they respond fast, if they don't respond, if I need to follow up multiple times. Those are all signals that I try to pick up on, because everybody is different, but also people generally don't want to be sold, especially not on a platform like LinkedIn. I mean, generally people don't like to be sold in general. I think a lot of people, like we are talking about here, prefer to doing the, covered 90+% of the buyer's journey by themselves. They don't want to have somebody to tell them if they need some type of solution to a problem that they may have, but they haven't actually started maybe researching on their own. So again, the type of outbound I do is mostly, probational. I try to get information from people, and if I see that somebody may be interested or may have a problem, I try to get them on a Zoom call and then see if over those calls I can probe even further and see if what I do matches with the issues or problems they have. And if yes, maybe we get into more of a sales conversation. Maybe I prepare a proposal, something that could show a bit more in depth the type of services I offer and how those services match with the particular problem or particular solution those people are trying to solve for themselves. So it's a long process. It's not something that happens overnight, and I would say there are days where nobody answers back to me. There are days where I send icebreakers and nobody gets back to me. There are days where I send connection requests and nobody accepts them. And I guess it's part of the game in a way. I don't think it's a sustainable strategy in my opinion. I don't think it's something that people should be doing forever, or even like as their own sort of lead generation strategy. In my opinion, having or implementing a hybrid approach is the most sane and the most sustainable way of building a business that lasts for decades, hopefully, and not just trying to get clients quickly. And eventually those clients may also, like you said, be more price sensitive. With that also means they're also going to be scrutinizing you much more as you start working with them. They're going to try to see whether the fee that they're paying you yields positive ROI very quickly. Because obviously the way you have approached those people is almost like you're trying to get them to become customers very quickly as well. So I think it goes both ways when the relationship starts with this type of clients eventually.
Yeah, well, I think you're a person that wants to provide benefit and is also naturally curious. So to your point, you're not out there saying, I offer a service, buy my service. That would, again, be, in my opinion, not a super effective outbound approach. But if instead you are using LinkedIn in the way that LinkedIn is meant to be, which is connections with people, and you're naturally curious, like you actually want to help a person. I assume if you did some sort of messaging to people and you had some sort of discovery call and you found out they actually weren't a good fit for you, but you know someone that can help them in a different way, or maybe they need a different company, or they need a coach, or they need whatever, and you know someone, then you could probably guide them in that direction. So as long as you are actually want to understand what their problem is and actually want to guide them in the right direction, as opposed to just trying to sell your service, I think that's a good way to think of this more effective outbound approach. It's, you got to start up conversations. I mean, that's, I think, the summary here is that if you're saying, I'm going to go to a cafe, I'm going to go sit down at the table and I'm going to keep to myself and I hope people sit down next to me, that's not going to work, right? But if you say, I'm going to go to the cafe, I'm there to meet people. And so when you're in the line, you're going to talk to someone a little bit. You're going to kind of find out what's their favorite drink. You're just kind of in a natural way, just being a friendly individual that's naturally curious and looking to help. And maybe it's the first time that they went to the cafe and you actually have a recommendation for them. Hey, you might want to try this latte. It's one of the best things I've tried before. Just be a friendly person that's out there helping people, but don't be afraid to approach and start a conversation. And I think that's what you're doing when you describe that LinkedIn. It's making connections, it's saying hello, it's introducing yourself, and it's not going directly into a pitch. It's starting with identifying who they are, if they have any challenges, and if there's any way that you potentially could help.
Yeah, 100%. I think you've touched on a very important point also, which is qualifying these people. This doesn't only happen when you do outbound. This should happen also when a lead comes via inbound. But you should always qualify. I think, I don't know, I believe that disqualifying 50 or more % of the leads that you interact with should be a pretty standard for any business. I don't think 100% of the people that reach out or you reach out to and get back to you are a good fit. You should be ready to turn those people away or redirect them to a better suited service provider that is not you. And just work with the ones that are actually perfect fits, because those are the ones that are going to turn out to be the best customers. You're going to have the best results for. You're going to create the best case studies, and this is just going to be a better way to generate more business for yourself in the future if you accept working only with the best fit clients and not any lead that comes your way. I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've reached the end of the episode. Like we said at the beginning, obviously we know professional service companies have limited resources, right? So we kind of want to try to find a balance of implementing both strategies. But if you do have potentially an internal marketer responsible for content creation, definitely leverage that person or those people as much as possible, like we've talked about in previous episodes with content creation videos, webinars, and all that fun stuff. And then pair those people with your sales team. Make the sales team and your marketing team collaborate on content, and then that's where you're probably going to see the best results coming from sales and from your marketing activities. Those would be my parting words. Scott, anything, last thoughts from you?
Yeah, just that let's say that you're a marketer, or let's say that you're an owner that's working with a marketing team, or maybe a sole marketer on your team. If you are feeling like you're on a hamster wheel and you're thinking, how do I get this number of leads this month? How do I get this number of leads this quarter? And there's almost like a reset button where every month it's like a new thing. Crap, how are we going to come up with new leads this month? Oh no, how are we going to do it this month? That, I think, is really a symptom of the fact that you're focused solely on lead gen and you're not putting enough effort into the demand gen side of the equation. So the thought would be, yes, things are going to be very stressful if you need some leads here and now. And that's fine. I mean, I think every business, or if you're starting a business, then obviously that is natural to have that. But you said this earlier in the discussion, Matteo. You said that the way maybe some things that you're doing today are not sustainable. So maybe you aren't going to be making 20 connection requests, and maybe you aren't going to be starting 15 new conversations and icebreakers or whatever a year or 2 or 5 years from now, right? And I think that's why it's important for us to admit that and say, you might have to do some of this work and this lead gen work, and your team might have to do some of this lead gen work, and your sales team, and maybe your marketing team is helping the sales team do this, but you might have to do that. But don't do that forever. Don't fast forward 1, 2, 3 years and realize that every quarter, every month, you've always been doing lead gen and just getting enough to get by. Because think of how stressful it is for everyone in the organization. And that's why I think it's so important that, as we've been talking about today, you focus on the short term. So you do start up some conversations, do some things, do some LinkedIn outreach, do some, all this stuff, but then also be planting the seeds that pay off in the future. And again, those things are, maybe they're videos, maybe they're webinars, maybe they're podcasts, maybe there are other things that are getting your name known out there so that you get recognized, so that people are seeking you out. And that takes a long time to do, but you can at least look and say, well, you know what? At least 2 years in the future, I'm going to have people approaching me because they saw my YouTube video. I'm going to have people approaching me because they've loved the emails and the newsletters that I've been sending out for the last 6 months or the last year. And now they're coming knocking on my door and saying, I only want to work with you guys, right? And so that is, I think, what you're looking to do. You're trying to strike that balance to where you're getting some gains in the future, and the work that you're doing today is going to pay off in the future, and it's going to make the life of your team, your marketing team, or maybe yourself a lot easier by that point. Now, you're not going to coast to that point. You're still probably going to do some lead gen. You're still probably going to do other activities. Your sales team is still going to be out there having conversations, knocking on doors, but at least you shouldn't be as burned out because you have a baseline load. You have a baseline number of people that are reaching out to you, and that's going to get you by, and then everything else is the cherry on top. So I think that's really the summary here is don't only think short term. Certainly think short term enough to pay the bills, but plant those seeds. Plant those seeds so it begins to pay off 1 year, 2 years later.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate your last thoughts. Thank you so much, everyone here, for joining us on this episode. We're going to be publishing this on YouTube and all the podcasting platforms out there. Feel free to reach out to us, particularly on YouTube. You can leave comments below the video or on LinkedIn. We're going to link to our personal LinkedIn pages as well as the podcast page. You can get in touch with us there and let us know if there's any topics that you would like us to cover in future episodes. Until next time, bye.